Good day to you, and I have a question for you. What is something that you do 10,000 times a week? Something you do 10,000 times a week. Do you blink that often? Do you breathe that often? Is there anything else that you can think of that you do 10,000 times a week? Because I'm here to tell you one thing that you do is you are exposed to 10,000 advertisements per week. 10,000 advertisements per week at least, including this one right here, right? Ostensibly, it's a t-shirt. It's Corona, right? I love Corona beer. Somebody gave this to me at some point before the pandemic where this brand has been tarnished, at least temporarily. But right now, I'm wearing an advertisement. Why isn't Corona paying me to walk around in this t-shirt? Because somewhere along the line, I'm going to walk past somebody and they're going to say, I want a beer and I want a Corona, and I have just facilitated that sale. It's an example, a tiny example, of the amount of advertising that we're exposed to in a given week. 10,000 advertisements. And so that's why we have separated out advertising as a chapter in this book, and it's the basis of our instructor video today. We're talking about chapter 11, advertising. I've been making the point already that advertising is virtually inescapable in our lives. I mean, you can't watch a YouTube video without an advertisement popping up. You can't withdraw money from an ATM without advertisements on the screen. You can't get gas without radio playing outside and speakers with advertisements embedded in them. Advertisements are all around us in the United States, and advertising itself is a critical part of the American economy. I have a friend, he's Swedish, and he said, I think the most useful saying of all when you think about what makes advertising successful. He said advertising is successful when the advertiser owns a piece of your mind. When the advertiser owns a piece of your mind such that if you go into a Wawa and you want a Coke, you just cannot have anything other than Coke. You're not going to have an RC, you're not going to have a Pepsi, you're not going to have a Mountain Dew. You're going to have exactly what is owned by that company in terms of your thought process and wanting their product. So let's delve deeper into advertising today. We're going to start with the birth of consumer culture in our country. The birth of consumer culture. There wasn't always a consumer culture, the kind of culture that you're living in today where you satisfy a lot of your needs by buying things. That's a consumer culture. Early advertising in the United States, actually it was the colonies, was running in newspapers, and the ads were targeted at very narrow elite audiences. Remember, audiences in the beginning were educated. They could afford newspapers. Other people could not. And so in the 1700s, you had ads like what ran in the Boston Newsletter, which was a commercially produced publication. Ads ran in 1704 for goods that were sold in merchant shops, like oatmeal. And there were no brands at this time. There were just the goods themselves: oatmeal, maple syrup, sugar, some of the basics that people needed to survive. And so customers at that time, they were judging goods by the quality of the goods. They weren't judging goods by the brand name. But this all changed when we get to industrialization. Remember, industrialization is in the 1800s. We have the mass production of very low cost standardized products. Like this tape measure right here. I use this tape measure around my house to measure things, and there are so many other people with this exact same tape measured with the exact same specification. It's been standardized. And so these are the kinds of products that are getting produced during an industrialization. And what we also have occurring is a phenomenon that we call modernization. Modernization is where people are no longer born with an identity. You're born into a family where you're going to become a priest or a barrel maker or a blacksmith or a teacher or a homemaker or a farmer. Your identity is not determined for you, but actually you can choose your own identity and you can choose where you want to live. And that is a fundamental change in our society that occurred as a result of industrialization. So people started to learn that they could promote their lifestyle with the products that they wear. Just like today, if you're wearing a lot of sweatpants or jogger pants, if you might want to call them, you're promoting yourself as a potentially athletic person. That's what you're doing. And people started to realize that. And so, since we have standardized products, products that you can count on as always being the same, no matter whether you buy them in Target or Walmart, since we have standardized products, we also start to get standardized messages about those products. In other words, advertising that is standardized. And this starts to take place in early department stores. Department stores are almost like a dinosaur. I don't even know if they're going to exist after the pandemic because people buy stuff online so easily today, and the pandemic has closed off the possibility of a lot of people going to malls. And so, are we even going to have department stores? But department stores in the 1800s, you can see some links to them. You can see some links to the early ads that were around in the colonies as well in the email today. But you can see the link to the department store that's now Macy's in Center City, Philadelphia. That was a warehouse. That was a place where goods were retailed. So they're made at the factory, and then they're sent to a wholesaler, which sells them to retailers, and then the retailer is the department store where it's nothing more than just a place to house goods. Like nothing's made there. It's just to house couches and appliances and clothes and jewelry. That's what a department store is. So let's talk about the growth of brand names now. The growth of brand names with industrial production, and particularly with railroads and steam engines, there were more and more packaged goods that started to come to market now. They could be made in the city and then sent out by railroad out to Lancaster or to Wilkes-Barre, etc. And so what we started to develop was an economy of abundance in our society after industrialization. That means that there are more goods or as many goods as people want them. That's abundance. There's no shortage. You can go down to the store right now, and if you want coffee, you're not going to buy the last one on the shelf. There will be many more tins of coffee on that shelf. And so the brand name starts to emerge as a word or a phrase that is attached to a prepackaged consumer good. It's a word or a phrase so that the goods can be better promoted. Like instead of oatmeal, we have Quaker Oats. It's one of the very first brand names. And even me mentioning that right now is going to conjure up in your mind the look of that Amish person with the beard. And you can see the Quaker Oats person, right? And that's the whole point of brands. They are predictable. They allow people to distinguish one mass-produced good from another. Like that brand of the Quaker Oats is going to look very different from the ShopRite brand of oatmeal, which is going to have a different logo. So brands help us distinguish between products. One of the very first people to really take the brand to the next level was Thomas Barat. Thomas Barat with 2 R's and 2 T's in his last name. And he had this campaign for a product that was called Pears Soap, spelled like the fruit, Pear, Pears Soap. And soap was used to clean floors and clean a lot of other things in the household. It's a heavy-duty soap. And he developed this slogan, "Have you had your pears today? Have you had your pears today?" Which was ingenious at the time because it's ingraining into people that they have to have it, number one. And number two, that it's a daily thing that you have to have. And if you don't, you're not normal. So in this context, the media that start to grow up in our country grow up as advertising-supported media. They are not requiring people to donate money for media to run. They are not relying on government funding to run. The newspapers, the books, the magazines, later on radio and TV, they're using advertising. And so let's look at each individual medium. Newspapers went from tolerating advertising to encouraging it. In the beginning, it got in the way of the stories, right? Actually, advertising is laid out before you lay out a newspaper story. How crazy is that? And newspaper stories are laid out so that the story starts on this page, but it doesn't end till the 4th page, so that you are forced to drag your eyes across those advertisements in the newspaper. Newspapers reluctantly came around to that. They tolerated in the beginning. Magazines started with advertisings very, very slowly, but once they went national, they could realize that they could have national ads advertising national products, like you see Gucci today, or you see Chanel perfume. And this is what magazines do today. Radio first tried taxes and tolls, and then it went into advertising. As we know with William Paley, who is the CBS founder, Columbia Broadcasting System, that radio network founded as a way to sell his cigars. TV had ads from the very beginning. And even today, you have whole half hours that are just one long ad. Yeah, think about that. They're called infomercials, right? Selling you a juicer or selling you a workout product. It's a half-hour ad. So how embedded is advertising in TV? It's really amazing. And one of the biggest events for television every year is the Super Bowl, and it's not even necessarily for the game that's being played between the two best teams. It's for that halftime when the ads that are supposed to be the best and the funniest and the wittiest and the sexiest and whatever, they're rolled out during the Super Bowl during halftime. So advertising is a big part of our culture. Let's talk about different kinds of advertising now. We've got consumer advertising as the first kind of advertising. And that's where local advertising is trying to induce you to go buy something. It's trying to get you to go to a store or a business. A car dealership is holding a remote on the parking lot. And if you go down there, you're going to get a free ride in a stick shift convertible. And oh, by the way, they're going to try and see if they can sell you a vehicle while you're there. Advertising on radio is going to try and get you into that parking lot. Same with television, same with a newspaper ad. There's a name for getting people to take action in terms of the kind of advertising it is. It's called a direct action message. A direct action message tries to get consumers to engage in a behavior like hurry down now while supplies last, or this will expire by Friday, or before we sell out of this product. These are urging kind of messages, calls to action. They're direct action messages to get you in there. Versus an indirect action message is to just get you to think of an image of a product. It's not trying to get you to activate and to purchase something, although they would be very happy, the advertiser, if you did that. It's more about image, like the ad that you can see in the link that I sent you in the email for Maytag. The Maytag, they make washing machines and refrigerators, and all their products are supposed to hardly ever need repairs, and that's the image they want you to have. And you're going to see an ad that's trying to communicate that it's about something other than repairing or making sure that the dishwasher is running. It's just assumed because it's Maytag, that's what the ad does. So we've got consumer advertising. Next, we're going to move on to a second kind of advertising. That's advocacy advertising. Advocacy advertising is about promoting a particular point of view rather than a product. It's about promoting a particular point of view, like getting our taxes lowered. You might consider that a political ad, but it's an advocacy ad. It's about a point of view that lower taxes is better for society versus higher taxes. Taxes used to purchase things like making sure that our streets are paved and make sure that our sidewalks are built. That's what taxes are used for versus people not wanting to pay taxes. It's an advocacy. Or getting people to drink milk because it's healthy. Or getting people to wear a mask. It's a great example of an advocacy ad. It's a point of view ad. Another kind of advertising we have is not strictly advertising. It's referred to that way. It's not strictly advertising, though. It's public service advertising, which is really public service announcements. And public service ads are supposed to promote movements and habits that are not associated with profit. They're supposed to promote people's behaviors that are good for society, like a crime watch would be an example of a PSA, or wearing seatbelts, or not drinking and driving. But they use advertising formulas, right? Like if you listen to one, you might think it's an ad for McDonald's sometimes if you're listening on the radio or watching one on TV. They use the same kind of format. So they are called public service advertisements. And then we also have trade advertising. Trade advertising is between business to business. So if you're in a hair salon, if you're working in a hair salon, you'll see a magazine that's laying there that has clippers and beauty products. And that's for the people who are owning that business to consider purchasing. It's a trade magazine. Now let's move on to talking about the advertising business and what it consists of. It's got four main groups to it, the advertising business. The first one is the client, and the client is a company that has something to sell. The client is a company that has something to sell, and not always are they wanting to strictly get you to make a purchase, as I've outlined earlier. Sometimes a client just wants to increase awareness of a product. Like, did you know that Coke makes a 0-calorie Coke? That might be just to get people to be aware of it before demand is actually built. Other times people can want to encourage you to use an existing product. Like you have baking soda in your pantry right now. I mean, it's not doing much good if it just sits there forever and you never replace it. So Arm & Hammer, which makes baking soda, may want to let you know you can use that in your refrigerator to take away odors, that you can use it to clean your bathroom toilet. You can use baking soda for you can use it to cook with too. And baking soda has a lot of use. That's encouraging people to use an existing product. Another reason for advertising to the client is on behalf of the client, is to build a positive image for a product. Boeing just had an airplane put back on the market that was down forever, the 757 Max, I think it was called, because of a crash. It was investigated. Now let's try and repair the image of that airplane. People won't fly in an airplane if they don't feel it's safe. Sometimes you can demonstrate the use of a product, show how it's used. People who see iPhones, they don't necessarily know how to use them if a new iPhone comes out with new features. So that's one component of the advertising business. The second component is the agency. The agency, also known as the ad agency. If you want to see how an ad agency operates, it's depicted quite accurately, even though the time period is old, in the Netflix series called Mad Men. If you watch Mad Men, you'll see what an ad agency is all about. It's all about trying to link up a client with a media distribution outlet. That's what an ad agency is doing. So if you're McDonald's and you come up with a new dollar menu, you want to get to people who are not rich. That's who you're going after. The working people working for minimum wage. How do you get to them? Most of them are going to be, not all of them, but they're going to be clustered in cities, in inner cities, because competition is so stark for work. So how does McDonald's find radio stations and TV stations and newspapers in these cities where they can advertise just to those people, young people who are going to be interested in going to McDonald's for a dollar menu? They do that through an ad agency. They hire an ad agency to tell them what TV stations, what radio stations, what magazines. And sometimes the ad agency will help construct the message for the product. They'll help construct, come up with sayings like, gotta have it. They'll have sayings like that. They have sayings that are adopted inside of the advertisement. And so ad agencies typically get 15% of the cost that it takes to purchase time or space. When you're an advertiser, you purchase time on radio and TV, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and you purchase space in a newspaper, 2 inches by 2 inch box. You purchase space on a web page, you purchase banners on a newspaper page, and sometimes you purchase video time on a web page too. Again, the internet represents convergence of everything that we're talking about in this class. Also, advertising agencies offer different services. They offer research and planning. They're going to be able to identify the characteristics of the audience, for example, that you want to reach. What makes them, what do they like? How old are they? What's their gender? What's their income, etc. Research and planning is something that ad agencies do. Also, ad agencies engage in creative activity. They help come up with sayings and slogans and imagery and costuming and plots that will help construct an advertisement that's going to truly grab a person's attention. They work very much on brand image. A couple of years ago, ESU redid its logo. It used to be a traditional river going down between two sort of sides of a mountain, which represented the Delaware Water Gap. They modernized it. They made it more angular. They put some gray in there. They made it different. That's an example of brand image that was paid attention to. And by the way, they did that with the help of a consultant. That's the second thing that ad agencies do for their client. Also, ad agencies engage in media planning. And media planning is what I referred to earlier. It's finding out which media to use and what time or space to buy at the best rates, right? You don't just go out and buy what's available. You got to find good rates. Each radio and TV station, they're charging different rates from each other. And so are newspapers. And the rates are based on the audience. The bigger the audience, generally speaking, the higher the rates that can be. And then finally, we have what's known as agency size and planning. This is another part of ad agencies, and there's over 900 ad agencies across the world, and the ad agency business has grown immensely. And if you go to Madison Avenue, if you've heard of Madison Avenue in New York, that's where some of the greatest minds of advertising are located and working every single day. And a lot of them come out of the field of psychology, and they're trained to get inside a person's head and to own a piece of their mind, to get them to really almost against their will, purchase things that they can't afford, that they think are going to cure some inadequacies that they feel in life. Of course, not all pot products are purchased for this reason. I mean, you need toothpaste, but at the same time, the advertiser wants you to feel that if you don't brush your teeth, you're not going to have a chance at a romance, or people are going to be staring at yellow teeth, etc. So anyway, that does wrap up the second component of the advertising business. We did the client, we did the ad agency. Now let's do the third component, which is the media themselves. So all the outlets where advertisers can spread their content. We've got newspapers, and newspapers ad revenue has been declining. It's been declining. Newspapers are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And a lot of that reason for that is because the information is put on the web for free. Newspapers trying to figure out how they can put a little bit of information on the web to tease people, but then put up the paywall where people have to go further and subscribe or pay per use of looking at a newspaper. So newspapers are still trying to figure it out. But still, newspapers are the third largest revenue source for advertisements. That's pretty amazing. It's still the third most popular place where ads are purchased. One advantage to newspapers is they can provide detailed ads, lots of details, phone numbers, addresses, formulas, dates. There's just so much detail you can provide in written form that you can't get across orally. So newspapers are good for that. Next up is magazines. Magazines are an excellent medium for reaching a very specific niche audience, like people who like to ski, people who are into bodybuilding, people who are into healthy living, etc., etc. These are the kinds of audiences that magazines go for. They're excellent for business-to-business ads as well, like the salon ad that I mentioned, because the photograph is king or queen in the newspaper, if you want to say it that way. And so the photograph can really show you what new hair clippers look like, for example. The print quality and the photo quality is a big advantage to magazines. Next up is outdoor advertising. We haven't really talked about outdoor advertising in this class, but billboards are all over the place, especially if you drive on Route 80 through East Stroudsburg and Stroudsburg. You're going to see scores of billboards and really polluting the countryside in many ways. That's why you have the Blue Route in Philadelphia, where in order to agree to that route going down there, it's an extension of the turnpike. The residents said, only if you don't put any billboards in here. And Pennsylvania had to agree to that. But outdoor advertisements are prevalent. We even have ESU being advertised down around Jim Thorpe. And if you go to the most dense place in the world for outdoor advertising, it's only an hour and a half away from here. It's in New York City in Times Square. In Times Square, you can see a link to Times Square. Just look at the density of ads there. It's impossible to see all of those ads, no matter how long you stare at that link. And so outdoor advertising is very big. The outdoor advertising appeals to car drivers. That's what it's for. You're not supposed to be taking your eyes off the road, but that's what outdoor advertising wants you to do. So outdoor advertising is very good at getting to a captive audience. They're stuck in their car. They can't get away from it. Radio is next up. Radio broadcast messages also to a niche audience. Some of the advantages of radio ads are they can broadcast repeatedly over and over and over. You give us 15 minutes might save you 15%. That's the Geico ad, the Geico insurance ad. And that message has just been cycling throughout radio commercials forever. It's a repeated message that goes on and on and on and on. And radio also can get to people in cars. People are captive in cars, and you have the potential of being activated. If you find out Kentucky Fried Chicken has a new batter for their chicken and you like chicken, you might get off that highway if you hear that ad. Certainly more likely than if you're sitting in your house. Most radio advertising takes place in what are known as drive times. Drive times, there's a morning drive and there's an afternoon drive. These are also radio's prime times. Just like TV has a prime time, radio has two prime times. In the morning when people go to work, 6 to 10 in the morning, and in the afternoon when people come home, 4 to 7 in the afternoon. Television is next up. Television is the spot for prime time and national ads. And you often have to purchase your ad like months in advance. Like the Super Bowl ads for next month, February, they've been sold since last spring, probably. But TV ads face obstacles like the remote control. People skip past ads or put it on mute. Different channels. People, again, change the channel. People walk out of the room when the ad is on. Not that other media don't face similar kinds of obstacles, but television is being challenged more and more and more. Cable television allows for targeted TV ads. Like it can target ads just for a restaurant in the Poconos without having to buy time on a television network and let the ad for the Poconos play in California where it would have no relevance. And finally, we have the internet. We have the internet, which is the fastest growing segment of the ad market. The Facebook as a property is continually showing ads and getting more and more money for ads, Facebook ads, and YouTube has a bidding process, and so does Google have a bidding process, and people are monetizing their own YouTube channels and turning themselves into ads. PewDiePie and Jake and his brother, these people are doing podcasts and they're monetizing their content through ads. And on the internet, since it's a converged medium, you can have video, you can have a search tool like Google uses, you can have banner ads, you can have pop-up ads. Plus, it's easier to track the audience than legacy media because of that IP address. We have Tim Berners-Lee to thank for on the World Wide Web is digital advertising and track what you're doing all the time. And so, again, every time you're on the internet with every keystroke, you're supplying data as a prosumer, so that data is then used by advertisers and clients and people who manufacture products to try and sell you something every single day of your life. So now let's go on to the fourth group that we can say that are part of advertising, and this is the group that we're going to identify as the audience. The audience, the consumer. I mean, in essence, the consumer, the person who's watching TV, who's on the web, who's on their phone, who's listening to radio, who's reading a magazine. The audience really can be said as the central product that is sold when it comes to advertising. I mean, think about it that way. In a lot of ways, broadcasters are not selling time or space, like I said. They're actually just selling access to an audience. So you could say that they are selling the audience. As a radio station with a top 40 format, I am selling access to teenagers up through 25, 18 to 25. That's what I'm selling. And so the audience is studied endlessly by advertisers. They're looked at in terms of their demographics, which are facts about the audience, like age and gender. Those are the two most popular. But there's also education level, there's income, there's race, there's do you live in an apartment, do you rent in an apartment, or do you live in your own house? Then there's also psychographics. Psychographics are the way that people think, believe, and feel. Psychographics are the way that people think, believe, and feel. They are the attitudes and behaviors of the audience. What do people who listen to country music happen to like when it comes to leisure activities? Well, maybe NASCAR is something that you learn as a behavior that people who like country music also like to watch NASCAR. That's something that psychographics will help you study. And there are companies like the Vals Company, which I've included as a link to in our email, the Values, Attitudes, and Lifestyles Company, Vals Company, which studies people and puts them into categories like survivors or believers or aspirers. You can read about these categories and the characteristics of them in the link and see which category that you fall into. So advertising is continuously a part of our lives. And that leads us now to finish off with some criticisms of advertising. Criticisms of advertising, number one, that there is a polluting aspect to it. Whether it's on radio and you can't get to music ever because it's always an ad, that's a kind of pollution. Whether it's billboards, whether it's people in your face with products that they're wearing on t-shirts, it can be thought of as a kind of pollution. That's a negative. Advertising also as a negative creates a consumer culture where we believe that we have to purchase things to belong, or we have to purchase things to feel better. That's why we even have a saying like retail therapy. Have you heard that saying? My boyfriend just broke up with me. My girlfriend just broke up with me. I'm gonna go buy some stuff so that I feel better. I'm gonna buy some new clothes so I feel better about myself. That's what retail therapy is. That's all part of the consumer culture. That's why so many people have credit card debt right now that they know that they shouldn't have, but they couldn't help themselves. They spent money that they didn't have, and now they're paying for it, literally and figuratively. So that's also a negative of advertising. And a final negative of advertising is that it clutters up the media content that we would otherwise be able to view without advertising. It gets in the way. If you have a newscast, it's not actually 30 minutes long, the newscast. It's actually 22 minutes once you put the ads in there. And that means when you go to get a quote from somebody who's a politician or somebody who's a witness, you have to cut the quote down. You're cutting words out to make room for the advertising that has to take place inside that half hour. So there is a lot of invasion of advertising in the media content that ends up shrinking that content, making it smaller than it otherwise might be, and then preventing us maybe from getting a deeper understanding of our world around us. Nevertheless, advertising is fun, it's exciting, we look to it to make us laugh, and it is here to stay in American culture. Have a great day.